My name's Ray Collier. I'm 51 now. I wasn't then. This is about Breathitt County, Kentucky, October 2009. Fog sitting in the hollows, like something that had decided to stay. I'd been back from my second deployment 14 months, living alone in a place off Quicksand Road. I bought cheap because I needed quiet, and the price matched what quiet was worth to me at the time. Ran a little firewood operation out of the back acreage, sold to 3 or 4 households in the county who didn't want to deal with a splitter themselves. Ordinary work that kept my hands busy, which was the point. I'm not a man who tells stories about himself. I spent 22 years in the Army, learning how to observe and report and keep opinions to the minimum required. So understand what it means when I tell you this. I've turned it over in my head for 15 years. I've applied every explanation I know, and I keep landing in the same place. One ordinary evening turned into something I don't have a clean word for. A sound from the ridgeline behind the woodlot. Low, round. Nothing I'd heard in the eastern Kentucky woods in 40 years of being in them. And a smell on the air, heavy, animal, sweet, in the wrong direction. Like a cattle barn after a wet summer. I know what people think when they hear the word. I thought it too. Coyote with an injury. Some sound the ridge makes when the temperature drops fast. I'd spent enough nights in places that wanted to kill me to know the difference between the woods being loud and the woods being deliberate. This was deliberate. I went inside. I told myself I was tired. That's still true. I was tired. Early October 2009. Isom's Diner on the highway outside of Jackson. I'm at the counter with eggs. I'm not really eating. The radio cuts from weather to the local call-in. A man named Gerald from over near Buckhorn says he watched something cross the road at the bottom of Wolfpen Branch at dawn. Tall, upright, moving through the ground fog like it had no particular hurry. The host laughs the way hosts do when they want to move on. Squatch season, says the man 2 stools down, not looking up from his paper. I leave a tip and don't say anything. I drove back on 15. Fog low on the cut banks. Radio off because I wanted to think. I'd been in Paktia province 18 months before this. I'd learned to read terrain, to notice when an environment shifts from neutral to something else. That morning on Quicksand Road, the shift was there. I just wasn't ready to write it in the log yet. I checked my door locks before I went to bed. Both of them. Old habit. October 9th. Frost on the boards. Kettle on the wood stove. I came out to check the kindling I'd left covered on the porch rail and found a feather sitting on top of the canvas tarp. Long. Barred brown and white. Dry. The tarp underneath was soaked through from 2 inches of overnight rain. Feather was bone dry, centered on the tarp like it had been placed there. I picked it up and turned it over. Red-tailed hawk, probably. A hawk crosses over, feather comes loose, lands. Possible. But the tarp was wet in every direction and the feather had no damp on it anywhere. I set it on the windowsill and went inside. When I came back out with my second cup, I noticed a smear of dark mud on the porch post. Wide, flat, pressed in, the kind of mark something leaves when it's leaning its weight. About 6 feet up the post. Maybe higher. I measured it against myself. I'm 6'1". I didn't take a picture. I'm not sure why exactly. some instinct against making it real. I checked the perimeter of the property before I started the splitter that morning. Found nothing. Heard nothing. But I ran the splitter closer to the house than usual, and I kept looking up. October 14th. I'd been leaving the windfall pears from the old tree by the back fence line. Deer will eat them and stay clear of the woodlot, which keeps them out of the stacking rows. My grandfather's method. I'd kept it up without thinking much about it. Late afternoon, I went to move the bucket inside before dark. The pears had been arranged, not scattered by a deer, not knocked loose. Arranged in 2 careful rows, balanced, the way someone might stack things to count them, or to show they could. The dog from the property up the road, old blue tick belonging to my neighbor Earl, had gone quiet mid-bark. That particular silence a dog makes when it decides not to push something. I crouched and touched the top pair. Warm. Not hand warm exactly, but not the cold of the others. I stood up. I looked at the wood line for a long time. 22 years in uniform teaches you to read stillness. There are different kinds. This was the kind that has something in it. I slept that night with the light on in the kitchen. I haven't needed a light to sleep since I was 8 years old. I needed one that night. Rain on the roof. Window showing nothing but my own face. I was at the kitchen table cleaning a carburetor from the splitter's engine. Parts laid out on a shop rag. The kind of task that keeps hands and eyes busy while the mind does something else. 3 knocks from the tree line. Evenly spaced. Patient. Not the random crack of a branch coming down or a tree taking wind. These were measured. The way you knock on a door when you're trying to be respectful of the hour. I set down the part I was holding. The smell came in through the gap at the window I'd left cracked. Thick, animal specific. Not a skunk, not a coon. Something larger. Something I didn't have a file for. I'm not a man who talks to himself. I said out loud to the room. There's nothing out there doing that on purpose. I sat still for 2 minutes. Counted. Controlled breathing. The kind you learn when the situation requires your pulse to stop running the show. I checked the back door, checked it again. A 3rd time. Stood at the window and looked into the dark. At the far edge of the woodlot, where the stacked rows end and the tree line starts, a shape that was darker than the dark around it shifted once, stopped. Or maybe the cloud cover moved. I went to bed at 2 a.m., lay flat on my back and stared at the ceiling and listened to the county. The knocks didn't come again. October 20th. The creek behind the woodlot had dropped enough from the dry spell to show a sandbar below the bend. I went down in the early morning to check the drainage culvert. In the sand, a line of impressions leading upstream. Each one long, broad, the toes pressing in as individual half-moons, edges slumping as the water came back in around them, but the shapes still readable. I crouched down and pressed my hand beside one. My hand is a large hand. Combat engineer. I've moved things with these hands. The print made my hand look like a child's. I did not take a photo. I've thought about that decision many times since. The honest answer is that I didn't want to start a chain of events I couldn't control. I know how that sounds from a man who spent 2 decades managing exactly that kind of chain. But this felt different. Private in a way I can't fully explain. I followed the prints upstream until they disappeared into the cobble and current. From somewhere high on the ridge, a long, low sound, round, like a voice trying to stay quiet, trying not to carry. I stood and listened until I was sure I'd heard it. Then I walked back. All day I kept tasting something metallic, the back of my throat. Your body knows things before your brain catches up. I learned that the hard way, more than once, in places I'm not going to name here. October 22nd, Combs Feed and Supply in Jackson. I mentioned the knocks to Deputy Watts while I was buying a bag of hydraulic salt for the driveway. "Bear," he said. Not dismissive, just efficient. They'll knock on anything when they're looking for grubs. "You got a compost situation back there?" The woman at the register smiled in a way I recognized. The smile that keeps things social. I smiled back. Bought 2 long-life porch bulbs. Bought a roll of heavy-gauge wire I didn't have a specific plan for. Bought a box of 3-inch deck screws, because I always need deck screws. At home, I boarded up the gap at the bottom of the back door with a strip of oak I ripped on the table saw. Even, flush, clean fit. I don't do sloppy work. That night the wind picked up and the house settled and popped in a way it usually doesn't, and I logged every sound in a notebook I keep on the nightstand. Old discipline. Write it down. Keep the record straight, windless. Fog so thick it muffled the creak. I was on the couch with a field manual I was rereading for no particular reason. Old phone charging on the side table, case held together with electrical tape I'd never gotten around to replacing. 3 knocks. Closer this time. 20 yards, maybe less, same spacing, same patience, same deliberateness, and the smell again, but different, softer, less barn, more like wet leaves and creek mud on a warm rock. Something almost familiar about it. I stood, crossed to the back door, opened it to the screen. "You need to move on from here," I said. My voice was steady, I made sure of that. "There's nothing here for you." I didn't believe that when I said it. I said it because it's the kind of thing you say when you're establishing terms. From the dark, nothing. Then a single small stone rolled across the bottom porch step. Placed, not thrown. Light. Careful. The way you'd set something down to show you're not carrying it as a weapon. What I felt then, I'm going to try to describe accurately. It wasn't fear. I know fear. I've been afraid in ways that rearrange you. This was something else. The feeling of being met by something that was also being careful, which was harder to manage than fear because it asked something of me. I left the porch light on until it was light enough outside to make it redundant. I didn't sleep. October 26th. Hard frost on the steps. Stars not quite gone. I sat in the camp chair I keep on the back porch with my old phone propped on the rail, video running, red light barely visible in the dark. I had my coffee. I had my notebook. I had 22 years of training telling me to observe and record and keep my interpretation out of it until I had the data. The low sound came at 5:41. I have the timestamp. Round and resonant, vibrating through the porch boards under the chair legs. Not a bird, not wind through the gap in the ridge. A shape of sound. I said hello and noted it in the book. Professional, clinical. Then I noted that I felt like an idiot. Then there was a sound in the silence after. Something shaped from a human syllable, the way a person sounds when they were repeating a word in a language they don't speak yet, trying to get the shape right with the wrong equipment. Home, or close to it. The first consonant was off. The vowel was right. I held position. I did not move for 4 minutes. I filmed fog and fence line and gray light, and nothing moved in the frame. I filmed until it was light enough that I would have seen something if something was there. When I played it back inside, the syllable was in the hiss. There and not there. The way a grid coordinate looks wrong on a map until you check it twice, and it's exactly right. I put the phone in the lockbox I keep in the closet with my discharge papers and my grandfather's watch. Thought that was the right company for it. High wind knocked the power at 8 o'clock. I had the propane lantern on the kitchen table, the good one, the one I keep fueled. The lantern made the kitchen gold and smaller feeling, the way camp always does. 3 knocks. Third time in 12 days. Same spacing, same impossible patience. I stood in the back doorway, screen between me and the yard. "I know you've been watching this property," I said. Same tone I'd used debriefing a subordinate. Clear. No edge on it. "I know you know I'm here." I paused. "What is it you want?" The smell on the breeze was different again, cleaner, wet timber, earth after rain, something almost, I want to say respectful. I know how that sounds. Near the hickory stand at the back fence, a shape that was taller than the fence by more than a foot shifted once in the dark. I didn't look straight at it. You learn in certain environments to use your peripheral vision. Rods over cones? It's physics. "Sasquatch," I said. The word left my mouth like a report being filed, like I was putting it in the record because the record required it, not because I was ready for it. A low sound from the trees, then a hush, the kind that has a decision in it. I closed the screen door, then the interior door, turned the deadbolt. I didn't slam it. I left 3 pairs on the fence post before first light, stepped back, held my hands open and low, palms out. Old gesture. Means the same thing in every language. 40 yards out, in the shadow of the hickory line, a shape that was almost the same color as the dark stopped moving and went still. I tried 2 low whoops, because that was the only vocabulary I'd been offered, and I was working with what I had. A long minute passed, long enough that I began to reassess. Then the borrowed syllable came back, better formed, still effortful, still shaped by something that didn't have the right mouth for English. Home. It landed somewhere I don't have a clinical word for. "This is my home," I said back, level. "Yours too, I expect." I don't own the ridge. We stood with that between us. Neither one of us crossed whatever the dew and shadow had drawn as the line. I understand, standing there, that I am not performing anything. There is no one to perform for. There is only the transaction between 2 things that are both trying to figure out what the other is. It was a Sasquatch. I'm a man who spent a career making assessments under pressure and defending them. That is my assessment. And it was frightened. I could read that the same way I'd read it in any creature that hasn't decided yet whether the situation is safe. A jay dropped a feather near my boot. I left it there. November 1st. Hard frost coming. Stars sharp over the ridge. No wind. The porch light steady and reliable. No knocks. No smell on the air. Just the creak and a cold truck on the highway, and the normal sounds of a county at night. I stood with a thermos of coffee and I said to the tree line, "You can go." And I meant it both ways. Away from my property, and deeper into wherever it could be safe from the part of the world that would not react the way I had. In the dark, 1 footstep in wet leaves, deliberate. A second placed beside it, no third. The low whoop came from far back on the ridge, faint, something in it that I can only describe as relief. Then a slow knock, like a hand pressed flat against bark. Patient, like punctuation, like the end of a transmission. "Sasquatch," I said. Quiet. Tasting the word like a call sign I'd been given without asking for, something I'd have to carry. I stood until my feet went numb, until the stars blurred, until I was sure. December 2011. Rain threading down the window. I found the lockbox while looking for my vehicle title in the closet. Discharge papers, grandfather's watch, old phone with the taped case. I plugged it into the wall and gave it 20 minutes. The clip played. Hiss. Pre-dawn gray. Fence posts. The sound of my own breathing, which I don't remember being that audible. And then the syllable. Unchanged. No cleaner, no less certain. Home. I stopped it with my thumb. I sat with the phone in my hand for a while. "I'm not going to share this," I said. "To the room." To whoever I was imagining on the other end, it's so like the forums and the channels and the men with equipment and opinions. They don't get access to this. This is not their data. I said Sasquatch quietly. Not to convince anyone. To remember that something spent a month on the edge of my property and never once came through the line when it could have. Every night it had the option. It never took it. The phone went back in the box. That night I dreamed a slow whoop, like moving away through timber, getting smaller, going somewhere safer. Woke with my hand open on the pillow. New place now. Renting a small house 2 miles from the VA clinic in Hazard. Street noise. Neighbors. A strip of old growth trees behind the property along the drainage easement, maybe 30 feet wide. A corridor, nothing more. I'm on the back steps with a coffee and the door propped open for the evening air. 3 knocks. Same spacing, same patience, same deliberateness that is nothing like a branch and nothing like the wind. I laughed once. Short, the kind that comes out before you decide to let it. "I hear you," I said. Quiet enough for just the yard. The knocks didn't repeat. An hour later, when I went to close the storm door, a single feather was caught in the screen. Brown and white. Barred. A little worn at the edges, like it had traveled some distance. I left it there. Normal life pulled me back in. Kettle. News on low. The dog 2 houses over wanting someone to acknowledge it. But the sequence runs in my head still. The way the grid coordinates of a place you served in will run, unbidden, years after. 3 knocks, 2 whoops, 1 word. I keep the porch light on every night. I don't know who it's for anymore. Maybe both of us.